we'll get started. So today we are going to make a chicken risotto with a pan-fried chicken leg quarter. And if you're doing the vegetarian option, it's going to be with cornstalk and king oyster mushroom. And I'm going to help you, I'm going to walk through how we should prepare all those things. So for now, you want to start preheating your skillet. I have here I think this is a 10-inch skillet with high sides. It's kind of the pan you want for your risotto, but you can totally have a saute pan too. And then I have an 8 to 10-inch fry pan here for our leg quarter or king oyster mushroom. Before we begin, do we have any questions for today? Everyone's ready to go. How many vegetarian people do we have today? If you just want to drop in the chat or unmute.
I'm vegetarian.
Okay, so I'll definitely keep that in mind as we do it. So I'll do both.
Do I also need to preheat the oven if I'm not doing any chicken?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're gonna use that to finish off the king oyster too.
Okay.
All right. So the first thing we're gonna do.
Did you say 350 or 300?
300. We're gonna do a low today because we're not using the oven. We're using the oven to basically finish off our chicken and king oyster. And this is a technique that you usually do when you're pan frying something. It's like you get that skin nice and crispy, you get those Maillard reactions going, and then you finish it in the stove because your chicken might still be raw inside. So we're gonna get started with our mushrooms. You wanna preheat your skillet to on low. We're gonna do the same thing that we did on Tuesday. We're just gonna sweat the shallots. So put a knob of butter into your skillet. And then as it's heating up, we're just gonna finely dice a shallot. If you don't have a shallot, because there's apparently a shortage and it's out of season or something, you can totally use an onion. Just use like a tiny bit of onion and do a very fine dice. Here's my cutting board. Get some more of it. And you're just gonna put this in the pan. The butter should be bubbling now. Don't let it brown too much. If you like brown butter, you could totally let it go for a little longer to get some color on it, but just watch it like a hawk. Don't want to burn your butter this early into our hour. And you're also going to take out your garlic. And for garlic, I'll show you a trick. If you're lazy like me, I think someone asked me if I like garlic press. I don't, because I actually have a better tool. It's called a microplane, and you can just grate garlic over it. And since we're going to use this grater for our Parmesan, you could totally just has a multi-purpose today. You're just going to grate maybe 2-3 cloves of garlic into your pan. Just watch the shallots, make sure it's not browning too much. It should be very familiar to you now. You've done this a couple times up to this point in the course. out. So once your garlic is fragrant, you should be able to smell it. That means it's done. You want to put in your mushrooms. If you have cat mushrooms, you want to thinly slice that. If you don't, and you have these oysters as left over on Tuesday, I'm just going to shred it with my hands and then put them into the pan. And we're going to cook them a little bit brown today. We're going to get those nice browning notes on these mushrooms. They'll add a lot of umami to the risotto. And at this point, you should have your shallot sweated, your garlic fragrant, and your mushrooms in the pan. I'm just going to use all of it. If your pan's a little dry, add a dash of neutral oil so the butter doesn't burn. And then you're just going to stir it up a little bit. I wouldn't go above medium heat right now. These mushrooms need time to sweat. Some of the moisture is going to come out. And once the moisture is all evaporated, they're going to start to brown. Remember that the Maillard reaction starts at around 280 Fahrenheit. So as long as there's water in the pan, the temperature is not going to go above 212. I'm just going to let that go. I'm going to clean up our station. How's everyone doing? Risotto is actually one of the easier, I think in my opinion, it's kind of like a very, once you get the hang of it, especially very straightforward weeknight dinner dish. So right now we're going to prep our risotto. If you have the chicken stock, I want you to take it out. And you want the chicken stock to be warm. So if you have a pot, I would decant the chicken stock into the pot, or you can put it in the microwave for like 2 minutes. So I'm just going to put this in the microwave right now. And the reason you want to heat it up is because you're going to basically cook the risotto to taste. And if you start with cold stock, it's just going to take forever. So it's a way for you to kind of speed up that cooking process. The rice is going to be, will absorb the stock more readily if it's hot, because you want to always keep it at a gentle simmer. Quick check. Is everyone good? Feeling good today? If you have any onion or shallot ends, I would just put it back, the time to put it back in your freezer. Is McKay here today? McKay is not here. I was gonna tell him that you can totally brine mushrooms and they will taste really good. They taste very seasoned. Take this time to clean up your station.
Hey, John.
Yes.
If we're decanting it in a pot, do you want us to put it over heat, like very low heat?
Yeah, low to medium. You don't want too much. You don't want to burn your mushrooms, but they need to. There has to be enough heat to cook it. If it's looking a little dry, add a little bit more oil. So I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil in there.
I mean the broth, or the.
What did you ask about the broth?
You said you wanted that decanted, right?
You can put it on a pot and you want it to be warm, or you can put it in the microwave for 2 minutes on high. Your mushrooms should start to look pretty good. You want a little bit more color on these. So take your stock out, it should be hot. Doesn't have to be boiling. So I'm using a cup of arborio rice today, which is good for now about two people. So if you are cooking for more people, adjust accordingly. I'm gonna increase the heat on these mushrooms a little bit, just so we can get these out of the way. What you kind of want is for the bottom of the pot or the pan to develop brown bits called fond, because that's how you know you're getting good browning, how Maillard reactions happen. And those brown bits are actually packed with flavor. And you can basically deglaze, the proper term is called deglazing, in which you're using a little bit of liquid, cooking liquid, to scrape off those brown bits. Whenever you see the brown bits on the bottom of the pan, that's packed with flavor. You want to savor it. You can see some of the shallots are starting to get stuck on the bottom, but it's not burning. You don't want it to burn. And once these mushrooms are ready, we're going to deglaze. I have a little bit of white wine here I'm going to deglaze with, but you could totally just use stock. You can also use water. It's basically so that you can loosen those brown bits from the bottom of the pan. Mushrooms are smelling really good, getting nice and brown. How's everyone doing?
I'm a little behind, but it's okay. I'm catching up.
No worries. Take a couple minutes. There's not a lot of things going on today. You just have your mushrooms. We're gonna set that aside. We're gonna cook the rice. That's gonna go on for like 20 to 25 minutes. And then we're going to then use that downtime to cook our protein or our king oyster. So now you can see the bottom of my pan getting really brown. These are the really good bits. Shallots are caramelizing. The oysters are looking pretty brown and nice. You go a little further if you want more caramelization, but I like kind of this consistency with my mushrooms. So I'm just gonna deglaze this. And this is, incidentally, this is also how you clean your pot if you have stuck bits down there, you know? Just boil some water and then you scrape it. I'm gonna pour some, just a little bit. It's gonna sizzle. And you're gonna take this opportunity to just kind of scrape the bottom of the pan. Sorry for the noise. You can see the brown bits just kind of lift off, right? And since I'm deglazing with wine, I'm just gonna let it cook a little bit more so all the alcohol cooks off. If you're feeling really lazy, you could totally just leave the mushrooms inside as you put the rice in, but your mushrooms are going to end up a little bit mushy because you're going to keep cooking them, right? So always keep in mind how long ingredients are cooked for, so that you're not over or under cooking things as you combine them. So this is going to go in the final mixture. So get another prep bowl out.
Good job.
We have a question from Tiffany.
Putting
Are we putting the vinegar in stocking?
I'm not sure where you're getting the vinegar. Did I tell you to bring vinegar? White wine, yeah. No, we're using the white wine or stock to kind of deglaze the bottom of the pan from the brown bits, right? We're not using the stock to cook the rice yet. We're just using a tiny little bit to kind of lift off all the good brown bits on the bottom of the pan. That is called fond, and the technique is called deglazing. Because what happens if you leave the brown bits on the bottom is that's just going to get stuck there. You're not going to get the flavor, and it's just a waste of good food. So my mushrooms are done. I cooked off all the moisture. And we'll turn off the stove. I'm just going to set it aside. These mushrooms will go at the very end. But we're doing it in this order because it's a lot harder to cook the rice first and then have all that rice set aside. So this is just to make our lives easier. This was just cook the mushrooms first. Plus you get a little bit of that, nice remnants in the pan to kind of flavor the rice with. Is everyone ready to move on to the rice? You can afford to take a little bit of time today. So I want the 7 or so of you to be able to follow along.
Quick question.
Yes.
Should there be butter still? Should there be liquid butter in that mixture?
And it should be, a lot of it should be cooked off. You shouldn't have too much left in there. We are going to use butter again to toast our rice.
All right.
So don't worry about getting all the little bits out. That's actually good because this flavor is going to get infused into the rice. And you're going to turn your pan on again, medium heat. I'm going to put another knob of butter. Lots of butter today. Incidentally, this is also how they make really good. This is how restaurant food tastes good. It's just tons of butter, tons of salt. It's not rocket science. So this is gonna go. Basically, gonna melt the butter again. It'll start to bubble, and I'm going to use this time to talk a little bit about rice. So with rice, usually there's a lot of starch, depending on who you ask and what type of rice. Something like arborio rice is considered like medium to short grain, so they have a lot of starch. Usually you would wash the rice if you don't want the starch to be in the final dish. In this case, we actually want the starch because the starch is what thickens up that risotto, right? That kind of creamy consistency. So you don't want to wash the rice. But let's say for like basmati rice, for Indian food, you actually want all that rice rinsed off. So what you would do, you would actually boil the rice, and then you would rinse it in order to get each grain separate. And for white rice, I eat it every day. It's obviously a different story. You want to wash it really well because you don't want the final texture to be too gummy. So once your butter is kind of brown, I'll let it go a little further because I love brown butter. So once it's brown, you just want to toss the rice in. And you're just gonna quickly toast it. And you want every grain of rice, you want to get as much of the rice coated in the oil, because what that does is it promotes even cooking when you add the stock in. You can lower the heat at this point. Basically just using the oil to kind of bring out the aroma of the rice. Don't burn your rice. That'll be bad. If you do burn anything at any point with the stainless steel pan, you want to get what is called barkeeper's friend. It's a powder cleaner that's super good with stainless steel and will basically make turn your stainless steel back into like a brand new pan. So once it's toasted, you should be able to smell it. Doesn't need to take long. We're gonna take our stock, and you don't want to overdo it, because you don't want to overcook the risotto. What we're gonna do is pour a little bit at a time, just enough to cover it. And then bring it to a simmer. So let's say medium heat right now to bring it to a simmer, and then bring it to, once it comes to a simmer, you want to lower the heat. And then the rice is going to start absorbing all this water, all the stock. And this will take from between 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how al dente you would like it. Usually with risotto, you want a little bit of the bite, but when you bite down into the rice, it shouldn't taste chalky, right? You want to cook that chalkiness out. Quick wellness check. How's everyone doing?
I'm just about to put the rice in. How much rice did you say should go in?
Like a cup. A cup will give you around like 2 cups of rice in the final dish, which is good for 2 people. A cup to 2 cups. You don't want, I mean, honestly, if you're cooking risotto, you might as well, like a quart of stock is gonna make at least a full cup. You can also use water if you run out of stock, that's totally fine. But now you can see my risotto's coming up to a simmer. And you just wanna stir it a little bit. Make sure all the rice is cooking evenly. And this is the part where you're just kind of watching it. Oops, apologies. You don't want it to be too dry, but you also don't want it to be too wet. I'm just gonna add a little more because I know I'm going to need more. The rice absorbs a lot of the liquid. I'm just gonna keep it, let's do it on low. The lower the heat, the less likely you'll end up kind of overcooking it. Plus we're gonna do other stuff. So play it safe, put it on low. Once it comes to a simmer, put it on low. And every now and then just kind of glance over and see if it's dry. If it's dry, add more water. After about 10 minutes, it's gonna start to thicken up, and that's when you're going to start to taste the rice to see if it's done. Take this opportunity to clean up your station, put away things you don't need. So the wine, keep the stock here. I'm going to take out the chicken. I'm going to break down the chicken a little bit more to prepare it for pan frying. And if you have herbs, thyme, rosemary, sage, take those out now too. We are going to baste our chicken or king oyster with them. And by now your oven should be, even if you have the world's worst oven, you should be at 300 according to your oven thermometer. We're going to move on to our kind of main accompaniment. I'm going to show you how to prepare the king oyster for those of you who are doing the vegetarian variation. You are going to half this lengthwise, the king oyster, and get these 2 nice kind of flat sides. And you're going to take your paring knife and you're just going to kind of score this in a way that kind of represents like grill marks. Doesn't have to be too tight, doesn't have to be too deep. But this is so that you get a little bit of texture and you're exposing some of the surface to pan, and it's also for presentation. Oops. Yeah, don't do what I just did, just take off the thing. So we're not going to use this one, we're going to score this one. Again, you can also lie flat on your cutting board and just draw basically a diamond pattern with this moisture. You basically want the incisions to be deep enough where you've allowed some of the flavor when we're basting with our oil or butter to go in. And just looks nice when you play with it at the end. So this is how it should look. You can see, yeah, it should look like that. And then I just set it aside. And now for those of you doing chicken, we are also going to make it look nice. Your leg quarters should be dry brine for at least 12 hours. If you don't have time, that's totally fine. You want to dry brine, anything is better than nothing. And what dry brining does is it pulls out some of the moisture in the meat, but then later the salty brine gets actually absorbed through the skin and it seasons the meat from within. So with your leg quarter, you want to basically trim around the ankle of the quarter. So make a hard incision around the leg. What this does is that as the leg cooks, this part, kind of the thigh part, shrinks and it creates this nice kind of stick-like presentation. And it just looks nice. So you want to break the tendons here. This is going to shrink as it cooks. And we want to avoid having a ton of fat as we sear this. So you see, if you see a lot of excess fat, you just want to break it out. And we're actually going to use some of it when we pan sear. I'm just going to render it out and sear the chicken in its own fat. That's a common practice in restaurants, which is like you use the fat of the animal to cook the animal, and it just basically makes it so that it tastes more like itself, right? And then for the chicken quarter, you might have this part when you took it off. You basically want to break it out. This part that's attached to like the rib. There might be a bone here, you want to take that out. And so now you can trim this thigh. So I'm just gonna, presentation purposes, I'm just gonna trim it. And as you cook the protein, it's gonna shrink, right? So you don't want to take too much away. But a lot of this, like, we call it like bad fat, you just want to trim out. It's gonna cause a lot of splatter when you cook it. So this is your leg quarter. This is basically your thigh and your leg. And if you want to break it up even further, you could cut it along this joint here. We're not going to do that because this is going to go right on top of our risotto. So take a look at your risotto. It might look low dry, And at this point, you want to stir it. And you want to add more stock if it's not done yet. So I'm actually going to taste it. It's probably not done, but I like to taste along the way so I know I'm not overcooking. Yeah, it's really hard in the middle, so still probably have like 20 minutes to go. Just going to add more stock. And you want to stir it because you can start to see some of the kernels are actually expanding more than the other ones on the outside. And that's just because your stove is not a reliable heating element, or your pan might suck. But either way, stir it so that everything's cooking evenly. The heat, if it's not looking like the rice is absorbing the rice. And then we're also going to, the rice is not absorbing the stock. We're also going to preheat our skillet that we're using for the oyster mushroom or the leg quarter. Just preheat it on high because we're actually doing a sear today. So we want tons of heat to get that skin nice and crispy and browned. And I'm going to just clean up my cutting board. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
So if we were a bad person and went to the store and bought leg quarters because life got in the way this week, will that totally screw me? Or
What did you forget? Sorry, can you repeat
I didn't
that?
forget anything. I have store-bought leg quarters because I didn't do your amazing.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
They don't look the same.
no, it's totally fine.
Okay, cool.
Store-bought is fine. You know, I buy leg quarters sometimes when I'm too lazy to break down a whole chicken.
I feel that.
So your pan should be hot. I'm just gonna throw some of the chicken skin, a little bit of the chicken skin onto the skillet. If you're using, if you're doing vegetarian, just use your neutral oil. Put some neutral oil here. And you want like a thin, but you know, visual, you want a thin but substantial layer of oil. Because that oil is just gonna crisp up your skin. And like we did when we did the stir-fry eggs, want to heat up the pan until you get that kind of first whisk of smoke. So just let that go. That's also a good time to look at your risotto, see if it's low dry. You want to add more water to it if it is. You can start to see the rice like really puff up and get it a little bit saucy. It's going to thicken a lot more. So for our saute pan, it's going to start to pop if you drop the chicken skin in there. I'm actually going to take that chicken skin out because this thing isn't going to render anymore. Make sure you're seeing that wisp of smoke. Add a little bit of oil. When you put the chicken leg onto the pan, it might stick. Whatever you do, do not move it. It's going to unstick itself once it comes to the temperature of the pan. But if you don't start with a really hot pan, it's going to stay stuck forever. And now's a good time to get your grease screen if you have that. So you'll get oil everywhere.
If it's smoking, should we go ahead and put it in?
Oh yeah, if it's smoking, put it in. Turn down the heat. You don't want too much smoke. So I'm going to put it in. It's hot enough. And you should hear that really nice sizzle, right? You'll start to see the leg quarter kind of shrink, especially around the skin. And you're just going to let it go. Turn down the heat if it's smoking too much, but you want to maintain that temperature. I also put in my king oyster mushroom for those who are doing vegetarian. Take this time to clear a cutting board, especially if you've been working on kitchen or chicken stuff on it. I'm going to put my cutting board away.
Are both supposed to be in the pan?
Is both quarters? You could if your pan, you don't want to overcrowd the pan, so make sure you're not, you could do it in batches. But I would rather you do it one at a time than overcrowd the pan. Because what happens is that you're going to start to steam the ingredients inside. Your skin is not going to brown properly. So we're gonna get ready to baste our oyster or chicken leg. Just have your hard herbs ready. I'm gonna use thyme today. Pay attention to your risotto. You can see mine is like really getting there. Water is really being absorbed by the rice. If you find your saute pan is getting a little dry, just add a little bit more oil, but should be enough from the chicken skin to keep it going. And after a couple minutes, you want to flip it and see how the browning is going. So you can see that the king oyster is like browning really nicely. It's going to go for a little bit. I like it a little browner. And I'm just going to press down on the king oyster because as it cooks, it will shrink. And then the middle part is not going to brown evenly. So just really press down on it. And the chicken leg should be browning nicely too. You can start to see it turning a little yellow. It's gonna go for another like 2-3 minutes. And the important thing when you're browning the protein or the vegetable is you don't want to move it too much. The more you move it, the less likely the mild reaction is gonna occur because you're shifting, you're changing the temperature and the contact of the ingredient to the pan. So just leave it alone. Stirring does not make it better in this case. If you are going to stir our risotto. And now's the part, now's the time when you want to taste the risotto. It's almost there. Why not almost there? Didn't realize it's there. Probably like 5 more minutes, I would say. But you can start to see it's thickening up. So at this point, I'm not actually gonna add more stock because this is a little loose. I wanted to thicken up a little more. You're going to check your.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Tiffany has a question. The quart of stock has been absorbed fully, but the rice is still pretty hard. Should I add more stock or water?
Yeah, you never want the rice to completely dry out. You always want kind of a very low stock level, stock to rice ratio. It's almost like a porridge, if you think about it. You could totally make this with white rice too. Arborio is just kind of like the traditional preparation. So now you can see my king oyster mushroom is really brown, really nicely brown. You want that color. I'm gonna let it go for like 60 more seconds. The chicken is also browning really nicely. I'll probably need a little bit more time. And the reason we didn't salt our chickens because we already dry brined it. But usually if you just you bought it from the store and you didn't have time to dry brine, you would salt it before you put it into the pan. Obviously, if your pan is smoking, that means it's too hot. You don't want to burn the oil. So, also this is the part where it starts to splatter a lot. So I use this grease pan to grease screen to not get oil all over my station. So get your herbs and your butter ready. You'll learn how to baste. And you're gonna want a large spoon. You could use a dining spoon. I'm using this kind of plating spoon here. I'm just gonna check on the mushroom one more time. Or the chicken one more time. Yeah. My oyster mushroom is really ready, so I'm just gonna flip it. And when you turn it over, it's what we call kissing. You want to kiss it a little bit on the back. And when your chicken is nice and golden, you want to flip it over. I'm going to call it done at this point. It's definitely going to be crispy enough. You want to flip it over and you want to shut off the heat. Take it off the heat. My risotto is a little dry, so I'm going to check to see if it's done. Yeah, I could use a little bit more time. I'm gonna add more stock. I'm gonna stir it. And this is the part where, you know, you turn it down all the way low because it's almost done, so you want to overcook it. And now we're going to learn how to baste. So your saute pan should be off the heat. You're gonna take a knob of butter, put it at the bottom, closest to the handle, and you're just going to shove your ingredients to the top of the pan. And the butter's going to melt really quickly. If it's not melting as quickly, you could try to turn on the heat a little bit more, just on low. You want the butter to be melted, and you're going to take your hard herbs, and there are a couple ways to do this. You could put the herbs on top of the ingredient. So that's what I'm gonna do. Or you could put it on the bottom. But when it's on the bottom, it becomes a little harder to scoop with a spoon. So I'm just gonna do it on top. And you just want the butter to be melted. And you're gonna tilt the pan. It might be easier if I move this. So Yep. So I'm putting the pan in the front. You're gonna tilt the pan towards you, and you're just going to spoon this melted butter over the herbs on top of your king oyster or your chicken. And what that does is that it infuses the herbs in the butter, and by basting, you actually prevent the ingredient from drying out too much while you finish it in the oven. And you can do this with fish, you can do this with pork chops, anything that you're cooking in multiple stages. And usually with, you know, a thin fillet of like salmon, you can actually finish cooking it by just using this butter, right? Because this butter is melted, it's really hot, and just gonna slowly cook the entire ingredient. And at this point, your king oyster mushroom's probably done. Your chicken definitely isn't, so you're gonna put it in your oven. So you're gonna put this entire pan into your oven. I'm using this like really tiny toaster oven as kind of like a salamander. So I'm just gonna put it on 220 for like 10 minutes. But basically you want the thighs to cook to 175. Anything lower than that, with dark meat on chicken, it's going to taste a little bit rubbery. Technically it's safe to eat at like 160, 165, but you want it to go a little bit above just so the dark meat tastes really good. So by now your risotto should be done. Taste it. Yeah, mine is pretty done. It's pretty al dente. I'm just gonna scoop a knob of butter in. This technique is called mounting. When you mount a sauce, you're just putting a knob of butter at the end to kind of accentuate the sauce, in this case the risotto. You just kind of want to whisk it in. And your risotto, the sauce should be it should be loose, but it should be like creamy, right? And when you draw a channel through the pan, it should create this channel that doesn't, you know, clear channel through the pan. You can shut off the heat at this point. The rice will keep kind of absorbing water, it'll keep cooking, which is why you want to do it right before it's done. And then this is the part where you have your mushrooms from the beginning. You want to scoop it in. You want to combine it. And as it cools, it's going to thicken. So don't be afraid to add a little bit of water to adjust the consistency of the sauce. At this point, the risotto is done. Did you have a question?
Yeah. If I have a little bit of oil left in the bottom of the pan from the frying or the searing or the term, is that going to be okay?
A ton of oil, you want to drain it.
Okay.
Yeah, pour it out into a little dish. Don't pour it onto plastic, it's going to melt. And don't pour it into your sink, it's going to clog your sink. And then
Very aware of that.
Now focus on the garnish. So I have a little bit of Parmesan here. And I also have parsley.
We need to salt the risotto.
Excuse me?
Do we need to salt the risotto or season it?
Yeah, you want to season your risotto. I'm just waiting for my chicken to finish, but totally season your risotto. Good call. Honestly, I love that you remember it more than I do. And also, I forgot lemon on Tuesday, but if you have lemon, now would be a good time. You should always have lemon in the fridge. It's like one of the things that I always make sure I have. I'm going to show you how I prepare it. A lot of people just go straight, cut it straight in half. With lemon, you want to, with any kind of citrus, you want to roll it around your cutting board a little bit, apply a little bit of pressure. That encourages kind of like all the juice to come out. And then if I don't care about how the lemon's gonna come out, if I don't care about the wedge in its final presentation, I'm just gonna cut off a cheek. And what this does is it actually gives you a lot more leverage to squeeze, and you're gonna get a ton more juice from this, just this tiny little cheek. You get a lot more volume of juice this way. So you're not wasting a lot of the lemon. Just one little thing, you want a little cheek of lemon, you want your Parmesan. I'm just gonna finely chop these herbs. And you're just gonna use your meat thermometer to check on your chicken quarter. If you're doing the king oyster, you can probably skip the oven section, but I find that king oysters, even though you can eat it raw, you can eat all the mushrooms raw. You want the middle part to cook a little more, otherwise it gets a little bit rubbery, which is not exactly a super pleasant texture, especially if you don't like mushrooms. It's also really hard to overcook mushrooms because they're like 95% water. How's everyone's risotto coming along? We're pretty much done at this point, you know. You're gonna plate your risotto, garnish it, and then you're gonna put your, you can serve the chicken leg on the side or put it on top. Gonna microwave my plate because we're serving hot food, so I have a hot plate. And then if you have a microplane or a box grater with cheese, here's kind of the proper technique to do it. If you're grating over a dish, you want to hold your microplanes steady over it, and then you're gonna move the cheese, not the other way, right? You're not gonna grate with your microplane. And then if you're grating a lot, what you can do is flip it upside down and use kind of the cutting board as an anchor, and then you're just gonna grate up and down. And this gives you a ton, just makes you faster. The plate's ready. So taste your risotto, make sure it's seasoned. Mine's running a little dry, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more water or stock. I would say the consistency is somewhere between like cooked rice and Congee. It shouldn't taste like a soup. Okay. That's done. It could be a little looser. But the important thing is that it's cooked al dente. No, you're just gonna grate Parmesan over it. Obviously, you grate as much as you want, but I always use a very generous amount. Unfortunately, we ran out of time today, so I can't show you the compound butter, but it's really simple. You need plastic wrap and you need room temperature butter. I will upload a demo of that in a little bit after class. And I'm just gonna garnish with some herbs. You could stir in the herbs when you're re-adding the mushrooms, but I find that sometimes, especially with finely diced herbs, kind of lose some of that brightness because they cook really quickly. So I like to garnish after the fact. Squeeze of lemon. And then we're gonna check on the chicken with our thermometer. Make sure it's at least at 170, because what happens when you take it out of the ovens, that's just gonna keep cooking. And be careful, use a towel when you grab the pan, it's hot. Sometimes people make that mistake. They think it's a cold handle and then they reach in and they severely burn themselves. So this is what my chicken and king oyster looks like. I'm gonna check the temperature. It's at 165. Could go a little longer, but carry over cooking is gonna make sure that it at least gets to 170. And at 170 above, it kind of loses that stringy, rubbery texture. So. And let's see. And the final flourish is just going to be to remove these herbs. You can use these herbs as garnish too. And you're going to squeeze a little bit more lemon. Don't do this if you're not ready to serve it yet, because the lemon's gonna make the crispy skin soggy, but you hear that? That's kind of the sound you want the chicken skin to make. Obviously, if you dry brine it, it's gonna be a lot easier because it just pulls so much of the moisture out of the skin. But there it is. That's our dish for today. Any questions? I'm happy to stick around for the next 5 minutes to answer questions if you have any. How did everyone's risotto turn out? Yep. You want to make sure it's at a gentle simmer. That's kind of anything lower, the rice is just going to kind of sit there. Plus, as you reduce it, kind of the chicken stock thickens and you'll get more of that body, and it'll create a creamier sauce with your dish. Can't wait to see you, Brittany. If you all want to hang around and, see me make the compound butter, I could also do that too. I know we're a little over, so I don't want to keep you, but I'm happy to also just upload a demo after the fact. But cool milestone, we are halfway through this course. So I will send out a survey probably before Sunday's session. Just want to get some midway feedback, see what other topics you want me to cover. But for me, I am at the point where I'm really enjoying teaching this class. So anything that you guys want to see, next week we're going to cover vinaigrettes and emulsions and pickling, a lot of side project things that I want you to start thinking about when you're in your kitchen, and that's going to create a lot more mise en place for you to play with, right? All right, well, if there's no questions, no requests, I will end class today.